The grand chamber of the Galactic Concord resembled a living mosaic of impossibility. Holographic arguments crackled and danced between delegations, creating a symphony of translated frustration that had become white noise to even the most patient observers. This was not just another diplomatic meeting. This was the 1,247th attempt to resolve a conflict that had defied resolution for over 3 centuries. At the center of the massive circular chamber, the Krelix delegation stood like a formation of living crystals. Their geometric bodies reflected and refracted light in mesmerizing patterns, each movement a calculated display of rigid precision. Opposite them, the nebulons writhed and shifted, their gaseous forms creating intricate patterns that told stories of fluid complexity and endless adaptation. Between these two impossibly different species lay a holographic representation of contested space, a swirling map of star systems, resource-rich planets, and strategic corridors that had become the focal point of a conflict no one believed could ever be resolved. Elena Rodriguez sat near the back of the chamber, almost invisible among the hundreds of alien delegates. She was unremarkable by most standards, a human diplomat in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a simple slate-gray suit that seemed deliberately designed to blend into the background. Most of the alien delegates didn't even notice her, which was exactly how she preferred it. The current mediator, a tentacled being from the Omega Quadrant, whose name translated roughly to endless patience, was in the middle of yet another futile attempt at negotiation. Its multiple eyes moved between the Krelix and Nebulons, each appendage gesturing with a combination of diplomatic exhaustion and barely contained frustration. Distinguished representatives, the mediator intoned, its translation matrix rendering the words in multiple languages simultaneously. We have now spent 3 additional solar cycles attempting to find a resolution. The resources invested in this negotiation exceed the value of the contested territories by a factor off. A sharp crystalline sound interrupted the mediator. It was the lead Krelix delegate, its body vibrating with what could only be interpreted as extreme irritation. Irrelevant, the Krelix representative stated. Principle matters more than resource calculation. The Nebulon representative responded with a swirl of colors that translated to a complex argument about collective experience and fluid boundaries. Another round of arguments erupted. Holographic displays flickered. Translation matrices worked overtime. And nothing, absolutely nothing, moved forward. Elena had been watching, listening, absorbing every nuance of the conversation. She had read every single report, studied every historical document, and created complex psychological profiles of both species. Where others saw an impossible conflict, she saw a fascinating puzzle waiting to be solved. When the lead mediator dramatically declared the negotiations hopeless, a statement that had been made countless times before, Elena did something nobody expected. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a dismissive laugh, but a laugh that cut through the diplomatic white noise like a precision laser. "Fine," she said, her voice calm and clear, carrying easily across the massive chamber. "I'll handle it." The entire chamber went silent. Thousands of alien eyes, some organic, some mechanical, some beyond human comprehension, locked onto her. Some looked amused. Most looked terrified. The diplomatic world was about to change forever. The archives of the Galactic Research Institute were a labyrinth of information that would overwhelm most sentient beings. Rows upon rows of data crystals stretched into infinity, each containing millennia of accumulated knowledge from across the known universe. Most researchers would spend weeks, even months, navigating this complex system. Elena Rodriguez needed less than 3 hours. Her approach was nothing short of extraordinary. Where other diplomats and researchers collected data, Elena created living, breathing narratives. Her workstation became a hurricane of holographic displays, each one telling a different part of the Krelix and Nebulon's intricate histories. The Krelix civilization had emerged from the high-pressure volcanic regions of their home world, Crystallia. Their entire evolutionary path was a testament to survival through rigid structure. Each crystal-based life form developed with mathematical precision, their entire society built on principles of absolute stability and predictable expansion. Their territorial claims weren't just political, they were a fundamental expression of their species' survival mechanism. On the other side of the galactic map, the Nebulons presented a completely different evolutionary story. They were a gaseous species that had developed in the massive storm systems of a gas giant. Their entire concept of existence was fluid, dynamic, constantly changing. Boundaries meant nothing to them. They existed in a state of perpetual adaptation, their very survival dependent on the ability to flow, merge, and separate at a moment's notice. Alina's background was uniquely suited to this challenge. Her doctorate in xenopsychology wasn't just an academic achievement, it was a passion that bordered on obsession. She had studied under some of the most brilliant minds in interdisciplinary research, combining elements of psychology, anthropology, systems theory, and advanced computational analysis. Her first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While most researchers focused on the macro-level conflicts, Alina dove into the microscopic details of both species' communication systems. She discovered something remarkable. Despite their seemingly incompatible natures, both the Krelliks and Nebulons shared a fundamental drive for collective survival. The Krelliks maintained their rigid structures through a complex neural network that valued predictability and security. The Nebulons achieved the same goal through constant adaptation and collective intelligence. Two completely different approaches, but with the same ultimate goal. Alina began to construct a psychological map that went beyond traditional diplomatic analysis. She created intricate simulations that mapped potential interaction scenarios, using advanced machine learning algorithms that could predict communication patterns with unprecedented accuracy. Her colleagues thought she was chasing an impossible dream. The head of the Galactic Diplomatic Corps, a three-headed bureaucrat from the trinary systems, had explicitly warned her that her approach was dangerously unconventional. But Alina saw something they didn't. She saw a puzzle waiting to be solved, a complex system of communication that had been misunderstood for centuries. Where others saw an unsolvable conflict, she saw a challenge of translation, not just of language, but of fundamental existence. Her workstation became a living, breathing entity of information. Holographic displays danced with complex algorithms, tracing the evolutionary paths of two species that seemed to have nothing in common. But Alina knew better. Beneath the surface of apparent incompatibility, there was a deep, fundamental connection waiting to be understood. The diplomatic world was about to learn that the most powerful technology was not found in weapons or advanced communication systems, but in the human capacity to truly understand. The conference room fell silent as Alina projected her first comprehensive analysis. Senior diplomats from across the galaxy leaned forward, their various appendages, sensory organs, and cognitive interfaces focused on the holographic display. Her presentation was nothing like a traditional diplomatic briefing. Instead of charts and statistical overlays, she had created a living, breathing simulation of interspecies interaction that seemed to breathe and pulse with its own energy. The problem, Alina began, her voice steady and confident, is not about territory. It's about perception. The lead trinary systems diplomat, a three-headed bureaucratic entity known for its ultra-conservative approach, immediately interrupted. Clarify. All three heads spoke simultaneously, their voices a perfect harmonic blend of skepticism. Alina didn't miss a beat. She zoomed the holographic display, showing the microscopic interactions between Krellik's crystal matrices and Nebulon gaseous networks. What appeared chaotic at first glance revealed an intricate dance of potential communication. Imagine, she said, that territory is not a fixed concept, but a dynamic ecosystem of interaction. Her hypothesis was revolutionary. Traditional diplomatic approaches had always treated territorial disputes as zero-sum games, where one species' gain meant another's loss. Alina proposed something entirely different, a fluid, adaptive system of mutual coexistence. The Krelliks understood territory as a rigid, mathematically precise structure. Their entire civilization was built on predictability and secure boundaries. The Nebulans, conversely, saw boundaries as temporary constructs, constantly shifting and reforming based on collective needs. Previous negotiations had tried to force one perspective to conform to the other. Alina's approach was radical: create a system that honored both fundamental worldviews simultaneously. She introduced the concept of adaptive territorial networking, a framework that would allow the Krelliks to maintain their sense of structural integrity while providing the Nebulans with the fluidity they required for survival. The holographic display transformed, showing how resource-rich regions could be managed through a dynamic real-time allocation system. Territories would no longer be static lines on a map, but living, breathing ecosystems of shared potential. This isn't a compromise, Alina explained. This is a complete reimagining of coexistence. The diplomatic course was divided. Some saw brilliance. Others saw madness. The trinary system's diplomats' three heads began an internal argument, each expressing a different perspective simultaneously. Dr. Zarek Thax, the most respected xenosociologist in the Galactic Concord, leaned forward, her multiple eyes, each capable of perceiving different spectrums of reality, studied Alina's proposal with intense concentration. "Explain the computational model," Thax demanded. Alina smiled. This was the moment she had been waiting for. A holographic display exploded into a complex three-dimensional matrix. Lines of communication, resource flow, and potential interaction points began to dance and interweave. It was less a presentation and more a living organism of potential diplomatic resolution. Most species see boundaries as walls, Alina said. Humans see them as bridges. The room held its collective breath. Something extraordinary was about to happen. The Quantum Diplomatic Integration Lab was humanity's most classified research facility. Nestled in a remote mountain range on Earth, it looked deceptively simple, a collection of sleek buildings that blended into the landscape, betraying nothing of the revolutionary work happening inside. Alina Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers dancing across quantum computing interfaces that would make most species technological experts weep with envy. The Harmony Protocol was more than just a diplomatic tool. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of interstellar communication. Dr. Marcus Chen, the lab's lead quantum systems architect, watched her work with a mixture of awe and scientific skepticism. "The alien tech experts are going to lose their minds," he muttered, adjusting his augmented reality glasses. The core of the Harmony Protocol was unlike anything the galactic community had ever seen. It wasn't just an artificial intelligence system. It was a quantum neural network that could simultaneously process multiple potential diplomatic scenarios across different dimensional perspectives. Most diplomatic technologies worked like primitive translation devices, converting language from one form to another. The Harmony Protocol did something far more complex. It translated entire cultural paradigms, understanding the deep psychological motivations behind each species' actions. Alina pulled up a holographic representation of the Krelliks and Nebulan interaction models. To an untrained eye, it looked like a chaotic explosion of light and geometric patterns. But to those who understood, it was a symphony of potential communication. "We're not just solving a diplomatic problem," Alina explained to Marcus. "We're creating a new language of coexistence." The system used quantum entanglement to create what Alina called adaptive communication matrices. It could predict potential conflict points milliseconds before they emerged, suggesting diplomatic interventions that would have been impossible with traditional methods. Dr. Chen's augmented reality display began to break down the computational complexity. "The processing power required is unprecedented," he said, his voice a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "We're talking about real-time analysis of cultural communication patterns across multiple dimensional perspectives." The Harmony Protocol could do what no previous diplomatic system could. It could understand the fundamental motivations behind territorial disputes. For the Krelliks, This meant providing absolute mathematical certainty about their structural integrity. For the Nebulans, it meant ensuring their ability to adapt and flow continuously. Alina initiated a comprehensive simulation. Holographic representations of Krelix crystal formations began to interact with Nebulan gaseous networks. Where previous models showed immediate conflict, this new system revealed intricate paths of potential cooperation. It's not about preventing conflict, Alina explained. It's about creating a framework where conflict becomes unnecessary. The senior researchers watched in stunned silence. This wasn't just a diplomatic tool. It was a complete reimagining of interstellar communication. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo, the facility's lead xenopsychological researcher, approached the display. Her advanced neural interface allowed her to see depths of the simulation that traditional observers could not. "The computational complexity is beyond anything we've ever created," she whispered. "We're not just solving a diplomatic problem. We're creating a new form of intelligence." The Harmony Protocol began to generate potential interaction scenarios. Each possibility was a delicate dance of cultural understanding, mathematical precision, and adaptive intelligence. It was less a computer system and more a living organism of diplomatic potential. Marcus Chen let out a low whistle. The Galactic Concord is going to have a collective meltdown when they see this. Alina smiled. That was exactly the point. The technological rebellion had begun. Humanity was about to show the galaxy that true diplomacy was an art form, and they were its master artists. The demonstration was scheduled in the most prestigious chamber of the Galactic Concord, a massive spherical room that could accommodate representatives from over 500 different species. Crystal walls refracted light in impossible patterns, creating an environment that was both intimidating and awe-inspiring. Alina Rodriguez stood at the center, looking almost impossibly small against the backdrop of alien technology and centuries of diplomatic tradition. Behind her, a team of human researchers prepared the most advanced diplomatic technology ever conceived. The Harmony Protocol was about to face its ultimate test. Representatives from the Krelix and Nebulans occupied opposite sides of the chamber. The Krelix delegation looked like a formation of living crystals, each geometric body reflecting light with mathematical precision. The Nebulans swirled and shifted, their gaseous forms creating intricate patterns that told stories of constant adaptation. "What we're about to demonstrate," Alina began, her voice calm and clear, "is not a compromise. It's a complete reimagining of coexistence." The holographic display came to life, revealing layers of complexity that left the assembled delegates speechless. Most diplomatic technologies worked by translating language or negotiating resources. The Harmony Protocol did something far more profound. It translated entire cultural paradigms. For the Krelix, territory was an absolute concept. Each crystal formation represented a mathematically precise claim, a fundamental expression of their species' need for stability and predictability. Their entire civilization was built on the principle of absolute, immutable boundaries. The Nebulans, by contrast, saw boundaries as temporary constructs. Their gaseous nature meant survival depended on constant adaptation, on the ability to flow, merge, and separate at a moment's notice. Fixed territories were an alien concept to them. Previous diplomatic attempts had tried to force one perspective to conform to the other. Alina's approach was revolutionary. The holographic display began to show a dynamic representation of resource management. Instead of static lines or rigid divisions, the display revealed a living, breathing ecosystem of interaction. Territories became fluid networks of potential cooperation. For the Krelix, the system provided absolute mathematical certainty about their structural integrity. Complex algorithms guaranteed their fundamental need for predictability. Each crystal formation could maintain its precise geometric configuration, while still participating in a larger, more dynamic system. The Nebulans saw something equally revolutionary. Their need for constant adaptation was not just preserved but enhanced. The system allowed them to flow and reshape their collective existence, creating and dissolving boundaries in real time based on collective needs. Dr. Zaruk Thax, the most respected xenosociologist in the Galactic Concord, leaned forward, her multiple eyes, each capable of perceiving different spectrums of reality. Studied the demonstration with intense concentration. "This is more than a diplomatic tool," she murmured. "This is a new language of coexistence." The lead Krelk's representative, a being of perfect geometric symmetry, spoke first. "Explain the computational model of stability," it demanded, its crystalline structure vibrating with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. A Nebulon representative responded with a swirl of colors that translated to a complex inquiry about adaptive potential. Elena smiled. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The Harmony Protocol began to generate potential interaction scenarios in real time. Each possibility was a delicate dance of cultural understanding, mathematical precision, and adaptive intelligence. It showed how the Krelliks could maintain their structural integrity, while the Nebulons could continue their fluid existence. "Most species see boundaries as walls," Elena explained. "We see them as bridges." The chamber fell silent. Something extraordinary was happening. A fundamental shift in how intelligent species could understand and interact with each other. Humanity had just rewritten the rules of interstellar diplomacy. The fallout from the Harmony Protocol demonstration rippled across the galaxy faster than any communication system could track. What had begun as a seemingly impossible diplomatic resolution became a catalyst for fundamental change. Within solar cycles, the impossible became reality. Diplomatic missions that had been stalled for centuries suddenly found resolution. The trinary conflict in the Epsilon Quadrant, a territorial dispute that had lasted for over 600 years, was resolved in less than 3 standard months. The Chlorophyll Collective and the Silicon Sentinels, 2 species that had been in a state of cold standoff for generations, began collaborative resource management projects. News networks across multiple star systems carried stories of the human diplomatic breakthrough. Elena Rodriguez became something of a galactic celebrity, though she found the attention uncomfortable and largely irrelevant to the work that truly mattered. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps underwent a complete restructuring. Traditional diplomatic approaches were dismantled and rebuilt using principles derived from the Harmony Protocol. Young diplomats from hundreds of different species began studying human approaches to conflict resolution, psychological analysis, and adaptive communication. Dr. Marcus Chen found himself at the center of a technological revolution. The quantum computing techniques developed for the Harmony Protocol began to transform multiple fields, from interstellar resource management to complex systems design. Research institutions across the galaxy sought to understand the unique human approach to problem solving. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Conservative diplomatic factions viewed the Harmony Protocol as a threat to established power structures. The old guard of interstellar negotiators saw their centuries of expertise becoming obsolete overnight. Backroom discussions and private communication networks buzzed with resistance and attempts to undermine the new diplomatic approach. But the momentum was unstoppable. The Krellik civilization began to adapt their entire societal structure around the new diplomatic framework. Their crystal-based civilization, once rigidly defined by absolute boundaries, started to explore more dynamic forms of territorial interaction. Young Krellik's researchers began studying human adaptive thinking, creating entire new fields of mathematical and social research. The Nebulons discovered something equally transformative. The Harmony Protocol provided them with a level of collective intelligence that exceeded anything in their previous evolutionary path. Their gaseous networks could now coordinate with unprecedented precision, while maintaining their fundamental nature of constant adaptation. Elena continued her work, largely removed from the political spotlight. Her focus remained on understanding, truly understanding, the fundamental nature of communication and coexistence. During a private briefing with senior Galactic Concord officials, she explained her core philosophy. "Diplomacy isn't about winning," she said. "It's about creating a framework where winning becomes irrelevant." The most surprising transformations happened in unexpected places. Smaller species that had been marginalized in previous galactic power structures found new opportunities for cooperation and communication. The Harmony Protocol didn't just resolve conflicts, it created entirely new possibilities for interaction. Dr. Zarek Thax, the renowned xenosociologist, captured the sentiment in a widely published academic paper. "Humanity has done something extraordinary," she wrote. "They have introduced the galaxy to a new way of thinking, not as competitors, but as potential collaborators." The Galactic Concord's central communication hub began tracking the impact. Conflict resolution rates increased by 372%. Collaborative research projects between previously antagonistic species multiplied exponentially. Economic models showed unprecedented growth in regions that adopted the new diplomatic approach. Humanity had changed the rules of engagement. What had started as a seemingly impossible diplomatic challenge in a single conference room had become a fundamental revolution in how intelligent species could understand and interact with each other. The galaxy would never be the same again. The final test of the Harmony Protocol came unexpectedly. Deep in the uncharted regions of the Omega Quadrant, a cascading series of interstellar tensions threatened to spark a conflict that could consume entire star systems. 3 major civilizations teetered on the brink of total systemic collapse: the Crystalline Confederacy, the Plasma Collective, and the Quantum Nexus had been locked in a complex web of resource disputes, historical grievances, and fundamental misunderstandings that ran deeper than mere territorial claims. Elena Rodriguez was called in as a last resort. The diplomatic summit took place on a massive neutral space station, a technological marvel that hung like a crystalline spider web between contested star systems. Representatives from each civilization arrived with centuries of accumulated tension, their delegations a study in profound differences. The Crystalline Confederacy arrived first, their delegation a precise formation of living crystal matrices that refracted light in mathematically perfect patterns. Each movement was calculated, each interaction a carefully orchestrated dance of geometric precision. The Plasma Collective followed, a swirling mass of energy and consciousness that seemed to flow and merge, defying traditional concepts of individual identity. Their communication was a symphony of electromagnetic pulses and quantum entanglements. The Quantum Nexus completed the triad, a collective intelligence that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional states. Their representatives were less individuals and more living nodes of a vast, interconnected network. Elena understood that this was more than a diplomatic challenge. This was a test of the fundamental principles of the Harmony Protocol. The initial hours were tense. Traditional diplomatic approaches had failed spectacularly. Previous mediators had been reduced to mathematical abstractions or quantum noise, unable to bridge the profound differences between these civilizations. But Elena saw something different. She began by mapping the fundamental motivations of each civilization. The Crystalline Confederacy sought absolute stability and predictable expansion. The Plasma Collective required constant adaptation and fluid exchange of energy. The Quantum Nexus demanded a framework that could accommodate their multi-dimensional existence. The Harmony Protocol came alive in ways no one had anticipated. It wasn't just translating communication, it was creating an entirely new language of coexistence. Holographic displays transformed the conference chamber into a living, breathing ecosystem of potential interaction. Resource maps became dynamic networks of shared potential. Territorial boundaries dissolved into fluid systems of mutual benefit. Dr. Marcus Chen watched from a remote monitoring station, his augmented reality interface tracking the computational complexity of the negotiations. "It's like watching the birth of a new form of intelligence," he muttered to his team. The breakthrough came not through compromise, but through a complete reimagining of interaction. The Harmony Protocol revealed hidden connections, subtle resonances between the civilizations that no previous analysis had discovered. For the Crystalline Confederacy, it provided absolute mathematical certainty about their structural integrity. For the Plasma Collective, it created frameworks for continuous energy exchange. The quantum nexus found a way to maintain their multidimensional existence while participating in a unified communication network. Hours turned into solar cycles. The negotiations became something more than traditional diplomacy. It was a dance of collective understanding, a symphony of potential cooperation. As the final agreements took shape, something extraordinary happened. The representatives began to see each other not as competitors, but as potential collaborators in a much larger cosmic ecosystem. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of it all, a quiet conductor of this unprecedented orchestration of understanding. The galaxy watched and waited. 5 years after the unprecedented diplomatic breakthrough, the galaxy had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Elena Rodriguez sat in a small research facility on the outskirts of human space, far from the galactic spotlight she had never sought. Through the panoramic window, she watched stellar formations dance against the infinite darkness of space. Her office was deliberately simple, a stark contrast to the complex diplomatic machinery she had set in motion. The Harmony Protocol had become more than a diplomatic tool. It was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent species could communicate, coexist, and grow together. Diplomatic academies across hundreds of star systems now taught the principles Elena had developed. Young diplomats from species that had been bitter enemies for millennia now studied collaborative problem-solving, psychological understanding, and adaptive communication. Dr. Marcus Chen had expanded the technological foundations of the Harmony Protocol into fields nobody had anticipated. Medical researchers used its adaptive communication models to develop breakthrough treatments for multi-species health challenges. Ecological restoration projects applied its principles to create unprecedented collaborative frameworks for planetary rehabilitation. The Krelix civilization had undergone a complete cultural transformation. Their once rigid society now embraced adaptive thinking, while maintaining their core principles of structural integrity. Young Krelix researchers published groundbreaking studies on flexible social structures, challenging millennia of their own cultural traditions. The Nebulons discovered new depths of collective intelligence. Their gaseous networks now coordinated with a precision that bordered on a new form of consciousness, while maintaining their fundamental nature of constant adaptation. During a rare public address, Elena explained the core philosophy that had driven her work. Diplomacy isn't about winning, she told a gathering of galactic leaders. It's about creating a framework where winning becomes irrelevant. True progress happens when we stop trying to defeat each other and start trying to understand each other. Her words echoed across communication networks, translated into thousands of languages and communication matrices. The most profound changes happened in unexpected corners of the galaxy. Smaller species that had been marginalized in previous power structures found new opportunities for collaboration. Resource-poor civilizations discovered innovative ways to share and develop technologies. Cultural exchanges became more than academic exercises. They became living, breathing demonstrations of mutual understanding. Dr. Zarek Thax, now the lead researcher at the Galactic Institute of Tenosociology, published a comprehensive analysis of the transformation. Humanity did not conquer the galaxy, she wrote. They taught the galaxy how to communicate. Statistical analyses were staggering. Interstellar conflicts had decreased by 87%. Collaborative research projects had increased by 372%. Economic models showed unprecedented growth in regions that had adopted the new diplomatic approach. In a private moment, reflecting on the journey, Elena understood that the true breakthrough wasn't technological. It was psychological. She had shown that understanding was the most powerful technology in the universe. The Galactic Concord underwent a complete restructuring. The old models of diplomatic engagement were replaced by adaptive, collaborative frameworks. Representatives from different species now approached negotiations as potential partners rather than competitors. As stellar cycles passed, humanity's role in the galaxy transformed. They were no longer seen as a young, emerging species. They were recognized as master communicators, as the civilization that had taught the galaxy a new way of existing. On the research facility's observation deck, Elena watched a new stellar formation emerge. Somewhere out there, new challenges would arise. New conflicts would emerge. But now, the galaxy had a framework for understanding. When humans said, "Fine, I'll handle it," the entire galaxy had learned to listen, and everything was about to change.